The Case of the Missing Animals. Written and read by Jana. Bob Jones was cold. He huddled up closer with the rest of the penguins and wished he'd taken a thicker pair of pajamas. It was just a few minutes before sunrise, and he was absolutely certain that today was the day. Today he was going to find out who did it. A week has passed since the director of the zoo hired Bob to investigate the mysterious disappearings of the local animals. "Someone is nicking my beasts, I'm telling you. 7 species in 1 week. 1 beast a day. I can understand the butterflies, but how on earth they managed to smuggle out the 2 giraffes beats me. Must be some clever buggers." Yeah, Director Davis was a good old chap, but as dumb as a dodo. Bob, however, he was not as easily fooled. On his first day, he interviewed everyone who worked at the zoo to come to only one possible conclusion. The animals were conspiring and running away by themselves. There was simply no other explanation. Let's see. The director was obviously not the culprit. His distress concerning the disappearing animals was simply too genuine. The vet, Dr. Whoopsie, was a short, round fellow, a bit on the heavier side, who waddled around the zoo, inspecting a splinter here, a sprained paw there, always out of breath, like he just climbed the Eiffel Tower. Just looking at him made you feel uncomfortable. There was simply no way he would be capable of doing anything else other than walking and helping the animals. And even that was obviously done with a great deal of effort. Then there were the twins, Larry and Barry, who cleaned the enclosures. They were the exact opposites of Dr. Whoopsie. The tall and lanky duo always shuffled about together, forever arguing about whose turn it is to scoop the dung. They seemed to have been even dumber than the director, and therefore would never be able to come up with a plan clever enough to smuggle the animals out of the park. Mrs. Krause, from the ticket booth, now that lady was as sharp as a tack. She had the equal wit of any criminal mastermind, but she was out of the question too. Mrs. Krause was a retired old lady in a wheelchair, and a precious little soul who wouldn't hurt a fly, let alone steal an elephant. And then there was Miss Rosie. But she was simply too wonderful to be a criminal of any kind. So there you have it. Bob spent the first day in the zoo, observing the visitors, interviewing the employees, and inspecting the entire area, only to come to the conclusion that the animals themselves must be organizing and plotting the escape, one animal at a time. There was only one thing for it. He decided to start investigating undercover. Every day he came disguised as one of the animals and tried to infiltrate their community to see what he could find out. First, he came as a chimpanzee. The similarities between the human species and the clever apes were just too great not to take advantage of. The chimpanzees, however, were not willing to share any relevant information. Perhaps they became suspicious when he refused to eat the bugs that he was offered by one of the apes. He did enjoy Miss Rosie bringing him the bananas, though. Even she was obviously fooled by his ingenious disguise. The next day he decided to overcome his fear of heights and join the family of bald eagles, thinking it might do him good to look at the whole situation from a different perspective. However, not only did he spend the entire day clutching to the edge of the eagle's nest with his eyes closed, too scared to look down, he missed out on Miss Rosie, and the only food he saw the entire day was pre-chewed mice guts regurgitated by Mama Eagle. It took the help of both Larry and Barry to force his cramped fingers off of the edge of the nest and to slowly lower him down. Only after his feet touched the ground did he dare to open his eyes. What a waste of time! On Wednesday he came in a pretty realistic hippo costume, and he spent the day splashing around in the pond. With a disguise as clever as that, he thought it was going to be a cinch to pry the information out of the massive, gentle creatures. But not only did the hippos not talk, he also got into a fight with a 3-ton male hippopotamus after asking his mate too many questions. He would have probably gotten quite flattened hadn't Miss Rosie broken the fight off. He was never happier to see her. His last disguise was going to work. He was sure of it. The penguins were friendly, sociable creatures, and he was already a part of the waddle, huddling together with the others and keeping each other warm. For his disguise, he chose white pajamas and a black nightgown, with a fake beak over his face. Crude, but seemingly effective. Today was the day he was going to solve the mystery. He could sense the victory in the morning air. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when he spotted in the morning twilight the slender silhouette of Miss Rosie. Great breakfast, he thought, and he waddled over to the fence to get a closer look. Such a beautiful and gentle person. Miss Rosie, he thought. Once this mystery is solved, I will ask her out for dinner. Come here, little fellow, Miss Rosie whispered. Come on, have a fishy. Bob waddled closer to the fence, marvelling at the ingeniousness of his disguise, that managed to fool even such a bright mind as Miss Rosie's. When out of the shadow stepped 2 tall silhouettes, and before he could make a sound they slipped a bag over his head, and everything went black. This is horrible. Poor Miss Rosie surely had got clobbered by these criminals as well, he thought, and made an effort to escape the bag, but then he stopped. Wait a minute. A genius idea crossed his mind. They think I'm an animal. This means that I can just go on pretending that I really am a penguin, and I will find out who the criminal behind this is. He stopped struggling and let his kidnappers do their worst. The 2 men dragged the bag for some distance and then stopped. Through the fabric of the bag he perceived that he was now in a dimly lit room. He could not really see anything, but he heard familiar voices. This guy looks like he's been here long enough. You should see his battered feathers and the hungry look in his eyes. He's more than ready to go, said the familiar sweet voice of Miss Rosie. Bob didn't know whether to be relieved that she was safe or angry that she had decided to side with the criminals. We are agreed. The transport has already been paid for. Larry is to take him to the docks immediately, said Barry. He has the truck ready now. But how are we smuggling him out, Mrs. Krause? Oh, this one will be easy, my dear. It's a little tubby one. We will just pop him into the crate of Penguin Pool. Today is Thursday, and that is usually the day that the animal's mess leaves the zoo to be sold as a fertilizer to local farmers. Nobody will suspect anything. Thank goodness, chimed in Dr. Whoopsie, sounding nothing like his usual huffy self. I have just about had enough of pretending to be fat and smuggling animals out under my shirt. I could use the break. Oh, Louis, you know we are doing a good thing here, Miss Rosie reminded him. I know. Dr. Whoopsie sounded a bit ashamed of himself and quickly changed the topic. Where's the truck, then? Larry better take the penguin out before the old man gets here. You don't want to risk him finding out. It is parked right by the ticket booth, said Mrs. Krause. You had better hurry, boys. Rosie will come with you to the gate in case anybody asks any questions. Bob couldn't believe his ears. They are all involved, he thought. But who is the head of the operation? He thought he maybe ought to stay in disguise to find out who their contact was at the docks. And so, the next thing he knew, he was bundled into a crate, which had its lid promptly nailed down. Then the crate got lifted onto a truck, and the truck drove off. He could smell the distinct smell of the rest of the cargo. Travelling among poop, he thought for himself. The things that a true investigator won't do for justice. In a while the truck stopped, and Bob could feel his crate being lifted and carried somewhere. He could smell the salty ocean air, and he thought, "That's it! Now I'm going to find their contact at the docks, and then I'm going to find out who is behind all of this." Carefully he pushed at the lid of the crate. But the lid wouldn't budge. Bob pushed and pressed and pounded and hammered the inside of the crate with his fists, but he couldn't get out at all. His heart skipped a few beats and then began to pound much faster. "Careful! This is a lively little fellow. That's penguins for you," said Larry, laughing. Then he added, "You may want to put him somewhere out of sight. Wouldn't want anyone to find this one." Then, in a way so that only Bob in the crate could hear his words, he whispered, "Have a comfortable trip, detective." Back at the zoo, Miss Rosie sat down and sighed with relief. "I thought we were never going to get rid of him." "And a good thing we did too," Dr. Whoopsie agreed. "He could have jeopardized the entire operation." "How many animals have we saved and returned back to the wilderness, Mrs. Krause?" asked Barry. Mrs. Krause looked down into the records. "An elephant, 2 giraffes, a zebra, 20 exotic butterflies, 3 snakes, 6 meerkats, and 1 pregnant lioness." "And a rather annoying ass," added Larry as he entered the room, "who is already on his way to the Gwhnsa Southern Polar Reserve." Everybody smiled. "Now, which animal is next?" said Miss Rosie in a manner that meant getting down to business.